skorzystam z tutaj takiej krótkiej.
I will just use this short break to introduce Joanna Piekarska. I have to tell you that I've been looking forward very much to this presentation. Joanna is the president of Polish IBBY section, but also the director of this library section in the National Library, and she will be talking about the role of a contemporary librarian. So, Joanna, please come to the stage. We will shorten the coffee break a bit to give more time to Joanna.
Just let me know once I should end my presentation. I hope my speech will prove interesting to you. I was actually asked to give a lecture or to share with you, and Magda said, sorry, I'm going to repeat. She said, could you please share with me what is your vision of life being a librarian? I don't know whether you will find it as interesting, but I do hope that actually the answer will be yes. When I'm looking at you, I have a feeling that all of you gathered here, including me, on the stage, we are here because of just one reason. We are here because of books. And books can be interesting for very different reasons. Some of you publish, some of you create, some of you produce, sell. Books can also be a way to reach joy in our lives or to create economic success, even though I don't know any publisher that would drive a car like Maybach. If you do know such people, please don't hesitate to tell me. We will be looking for some sponsors, and we would definitely be happy to get their attention. Anyway, even if books is what you do for a living, well, let's face it. A publisher, being a little entrepreneur, is a person that chose this particular segment of the market, most probably because of other reasons than just thinking that this is something that will bring him or her a fortune. This is rarely the case. So I will have a pleasure to present a place that has become my second home for last 20 years. This is this National Library. It is here where I developed my personality as a human being and as a librarian. I feel that I've achieved success as a librarian, and it gives me satisfaction, and I get a lot of joy from doing what I like doing and what brings me satisfaction, or even, I dare say, happiness. The National Library is indeed a unique place, even for people who are not librarians. I mean, the very opportunity to be here in that sanctuary of books can be itself a source of pleasure. I am almost 50 now, and I must say that I like my work so much that I wouldn't exchange it to anything else. I really appreciate that at my work I can develop. I am in touch with people whom I believe to be so valuable. In any other segment have I ever met so many interesting people who are interested so much in the texts. Therefore, I like to say that I really love my job because I have unlimited access to books. People react differently when I hear it. Mostly they say that I am the very first person that they ever met who claimed that this is, who said something like that about their job. So I said already that the National Library is a unique place, not only for me, but also for many others. And Terry Pratchett actually wrote that the library was the largest collection of magical texts in the entire multiverse. Thousands of volumes full of occult knowledge rested there on the shelves. Apparently, because large amounts of magic could strongly deform the ordinary world, the library did not follow the normal rules of time and space. It was set to stretch on for eternity. Supposedly, one could wander among the distant bookcases for days. Supposedly, whole tribes of lost students lived somewhere. Supposedly, unusual creatures lurked in forgotten alcoves and were hunted by even stranger beings. This is a great characterization of our work at this library, right? I am indeed part of this tribe. We like to keep order on shelves, but also in catalogs. So librarians account for a tribe of people that document all statistics, all achievements, even on small pieces of papers, or they have their own books, notebooks, where they will do notes, or even some of them use Excel sheets. Therefore, I'd like to share with you some data. Hopefully, that data will allow us easier to carry out conversation. I have some data for the year 2022 because we haven't finalized the report for 2023. Anyway, as of 2022, in the collection, we got over 212,000 new units, new books. People say that more books are published every year than in the previous one, so this market is growing all the time. At the end of 2022, we had the collection amounting to 10 million units, materials, not only books, at the storage room and other storage facilities of the National Library. So indeed, we have a huge collection. Now, guards, librarians as guardians. So librarians are guardians of that collection, but the collection is meant for you, for our readers. Then we also archive something called legal deposits, one copy of each book, so that this is something preserved for the future generations. And our collections, new collections, include, and here I'm praising you, dear publishers, mostly those new books that we receive as legal deposits. Last year it was over 180,000 units. We expect in the year 2023 this number will be even higher. Let's, however, also not ignore other sources of new collection. To me, especially important are donations. And I've been looking at donations for several years, and I really loved that period of my professional career. And I must say that I always admired and I was always surprised at private people taking a decision that they want to donate to the national libraries some books that they stored for generations. These are books that were very valuable for many families. And we have some quite unique items within our collection, books that you can't purchase anymore, and that would even be hard to make a valuation of. These books were donated to the library. Sometimes, even though those people knew very well that they could get some great market price, and yet they decided to donate their books to us. 23,000 units, this is really quite impressive, especially looking at the situation which says that our collection only includes those donations whose copies we don't have at all. I once conducted such statistics, and I calculated that 7% of the whole inflow of units to the library will become part of the collection. So this is really of huge importance. So this is my thank you to the publishers. Also, I'd like to reassure you. You know very well that those legal deposits are sent to 17 places. If such books won't become part of the collection, then pursuant to the regulation, these legal deposits will go to different libraries, so they won't get lost or wasted. We, the tribe of librarians, as I said, we love order and we always look at data, so nothing will get lost. Also, we have a special department at the National Library that passes materials that we don't need to other libraries, a separate department. And some 10 years ago, we had 1.5 million double copies. Now it's less than 200,000, which means so many books were distributed among public libraries, including legal deposits. Apart from public libraries, we can only donate or distribute books that come from donations or exchange. Non-public and public libraries can hence also become beneficiaries. The National Library is also supervising the money which is spent under the National Readership Promotion Program. The program was implemented in 2021 and it was completed with the end of 2023. In that period, the library distributed almost 80 million zloty for that purpose. In the year 2024, as much as 33 million zloty has been allocated for subsidies to public libraries, and this is the money provided by the Ministry of Culture. I'm sure you know this program very well, so let me just stress one thing. As I said, it's the National Readership Promotion Program, and the basic pillar of the program means that libraries are obliged to buy new publications, only publishing novelties. So we're not only supporting libraries in their spending, but we are also making sure that they buy your new publications. And also, these are the books that frequently are sought for by readers. And with this program, libraries have an option to do so. According to the National Statistics Office, at the end of the year in Poland, there were over 7,500 public libraries. 64% of them account for libraries operating in the countryside. And be aware, in those libraries, we have over 124 volumes that were so far borrowed by many people. You can see the numbers on the screen. These about 5 million people. So apart from lending books, and as I said, 124 million books were lent to almost 5 million people, libraries also organize different events related to readership and books. In the year 2022, more people took part in these events than the number of people that borrowed books. So also very highly attended are conferences and seminars, and we organized 640 such events last year. What we take pride in is our report on readership. This is something we've been looking into for 30 years now. So this report doesn't describe the way libraries are used, but rather it's based on the declarations regarding read books. So this report has a very broad social context, and doesn't include the information about the sources of books and the way people use the books. So, are we happy or should we be sad by all these facts? Is it simply the structure of our society? 1/3 of people who read anything, like 34% of respondents read at least one book a year, and 7% of respondents read 7 and more books per year. Is this a lot or not? It's really not much. So we are in despair. Also, if you look at this number, 34% of people who only read one book, well, it's a double-digit number, but it is quite unsettling because it means that only 33% of teachers who teach your children, maybe they are also part of that group, that they only read one book. Or think about medical doctors who should come up with current state-of-the-art therapies, and maybe they are also part of that group that only read one book a year. Of course, these are only sweeping generalizations. Sometimes they are not justified, because in some groups, these percentage rates may be much higher. But that simple statistics is indeed frightening. Women read books more frequently than men. It's a difference that we can clearly conclude. 42% of men read books, and only 26% of men declare they do. Have you read the book Chłopki? Females in the countryside. Well, it's really a bestseller right now in Poland. So having read that book, you know very well that women were always motivated to provide better life to their children than the one they had as a child. And Magda said one day that she wants a book to become a sensual stimulus, so that it really appeals to many of your senses. So please close your eyes for a moment. Recall a moment when you were read out to. Who read to you? In what circumstances? It may be that you were hugged by your mom or your grandma, who were talking to you, telling you a story, stopping when they saw that you were becoming nervous or upset. Or they would read again the passages that you loved especially, whenever you asked. Reading can really contribute to survival. But apart from that, reading is something that you provide to a different human being as a gift. I don't like the word sacrifice, but you can give or devote time to your child, patience, and interest. And reading, even though we see that more and more daddies also read books to their children, and that's great. They are not ashamed. That's just the opposite. They believe it's quite noble thing to do. And yet, reading is oftentimes associated with women because it requires care. Women, experts in multitasking, have this natural instinct. They can be patient, and they really have a drive. They want to teach young children. Also, at a certain moment in life, women learn more, or they are at least more eager to learn more. So that also automatically means reading. But we know, looking at declarations, that reading is also something that gives people peace and a lot of joy. Now, in the report on readership in Poland, we can also read about different aspects of reading, which is relations. In the report, it says a book is not only a nice thing you want to give as a gift to your child. Sociologists and psychologists have observed that a book could be something more. Because we don't want a book to be just a gift, a nice gift. well, if I buy sweets, then the mom might be angry with me because they shouldn't eat too many sweets. Or if I take a child to a McDonald's restaurant, well, this is junk food. So I will buy a book. By buying a book, I will do something good. So the more colorful the book, the better, probably. Yes, that might be true. At the book fair recently, I was asked whether one should buy books with a gift attached to it, like a little toy car. So could a book be like a gadget? Well, I haven't looked at all the books that have a toy attached to it, so I can't say that they are of poor quality. But I understand why producers add these little toys to books to encourage people to buy. I'm sure you will be able to find books that were not worth it. And so this toy car maybe was the most valuable thing about the purchase. However, from the viewpoint of a librarian, a mom, and a woman, I really hope that every child gets a parent as something attached to a book, an attentive parent that will spend their time to read this book together. 54% of the respondents chose a book that was recommended by someone close to them. This has been concluded by the report. So indeed, being in touch with a different person, hearing his or her opinion, that would be the source of the most strongest recommendation.
Jak to jest?
I was wondering today how we achieve it. And I thought that, indeed, in order to convince me to do something I don't want, like, for example, buying a rainbow vacuum cleaner, I would have to talk to someone whom I trust and who is an authority for me. I would probably check if that person has a clean house and if that vacuum cleaner actually works. And there is a possibility that someone who is an authority in a certain area or who is close to me and whom I trust, and one does not exclude the other, that person would be this person who could convince me to also choose a book. Professor Papuzińska said this thing that buying a book in Poland is an economic choice and not a cultural choice. And I'm sure it is so in many houses. The professor Joanna Piekarska says about it brutally that in many houses where there is not even one book, it's not a problem to buy 2 bottles of beer. Well, you can buy a book for the same price. She wrote about it in the 90s. But let me give you another example from my private life. I'm a mother of a grown-up daughter. She's 24 today, but when she was 4 years old, she was sitting in front of the TV so focused, and she was watching some program on MTV. And I wanted to go out, and I said, "Why don't you get dressed?" And she said, "No, I need to watch it till the end." I entered the room, and I saw that there was MTV on the screen, and there was MTV Cribs. And there was Michał Wiśniewski, the singer, who was showing his house to the audience. And I said, "Oh, this is Michał Wiśniewski." Yes. And I asked, "Are you interested in Michał Wiśniewski?" She says she did not so much. And then she said, "Well, because they went through all the rooms and there is not even one bookshelf." So is it an economic or a cultural choice? I would like to believe that it's the economy, but all my observations show that it's the other thing. But I would also like to ask you whether you really think that you need to buy a book, to have it, to put it on your shelf in order to be a reader. And is this an absolute condition? I would like to repeat it once again. Relations and bonds. Maybe we trust a person who is important to us and we want to read the same thing that they read because we want to share their enthusiasm. But let me tell you about my other professional experience. I've been working here for 20 years. in the library education department, which educates librarians, teachers, and other persons working in this area of culture. It also does less typical activities. We also train the prison employees to prepare certain educational program for the prisoners. My brother works in the penal services, and he showed me that sometimes a book is the only form of freedom that people who do not have freedom can actually experience. A few years ago, I was working as a volunteer in the arrest in Białęka, and we were and there was some program with the fathers who were spending a lifetime in prison, and my task was to tell them about children's books and to explain it to them, to make them understand what it is about and what is the deep content of the stories written in a simple language and which can seem very simple at the first glance. And we wanted them, based on those stories, to renew the bonds with their children. The participants of this program were usually men who did not have any of these bonds with their children. And one of the convicts used very strong words to me, and he told me that I am deeply mistaken if I think that you can create a relation with a child by reading a book and only having half an hour of a phone call per week at your disposal. I usually talk faster than I think, and I like to share my private experiences. So I used nicer words, but I replied him that if my ex-husband had to spend half an hour per week on a constructive conversation with our daughter, we would still be married, probably. They laughed at me. The tension disappeared, and we were meeting for a few months, and at the end of this program, one of the convicts was rewriting those books and giving them away to others. And each time I visited them, and we only had 1 hour for each meeting, at the beginning, for several minutes, they were telling me actually what they managed to talk about with their children. At the beginning, they were obviously only reading, and the child was listening, but then they were starting to discuss the content of the books, and then they were talking about anything, about how they were doing, and also about what they wished to happen, what was important for them. And there was also a penal facility, another one, where I met a man who didn't know who Red Riding Hood was. But there is also another penal facility, which is also important, because in a situation where 34% of Poles read at least one book during a year, do you know how many convicts read at least one book per year? 84. I am not encouraging you, but there must be some correlation between having free time and access to literature. So 84%, and they rarely read like we do, only one book per year. Usually it's many more books than 7. So getting back to the bonds, first you need to function among people, to be open to people, to find out what others read, and to get this advice, but also the other way around. And I deeply believe in it. And out of all the religions in the world, I mostly believe in the other person. I believe that you can create deep bonds with other people by talking about books. I could say that it's a cultural code, but I will be talking about bonds because they will be important in the context of what I will tell you in my presentation. The last research shows the increase of interest in this group, which is the most important for me. So non-adults, you know that until the age of 12, kids read quite intensely. Then there is a pause. Other things are interesting. Obviously, all those gifts in the form of laptops, smartphones, they help. I'm joking, but they do not need to be a distraction, and one does not have to exclude the other. But indeed, we see that the percentage of the readers who read little or a bit more in this age group has increased. And this is the photo from the last book fair in Poznań. I was there, I participated in the fair, and my friend took this photo. It was our internal day on Saturday and Sunday. It was so crowded that we couldn't even take a photo. I would like to talk about the report about the diagnosis of the needs of the young recipient of cultural events. Agnieszka Karp-Szymańska wrote a very interesting report, and she draws the attention to the needs of young readers, but also to the needs of the parents, what they expect from books, from libraries, and what sense is there in participating in the culture. We also look at how the world is changing around us, how intensely, how fast we are running, and how difficult it is to read while running. She says that some readers and their parents can be afraid of using the library because they are afraid that they will damage the books and they will have to pay for them. But then the question is, what is this penalty actually? They don't know how to answer this question. The library is there, but they say that the workshops in library are usually at the same time that schools and kindergartens are open and the parents are at work, so they are not really accessible. So they are in the area, but they do not disturb. That's what the parents say. And let me tell you about another report, which is sad. You probably know it because it's related with the mental health of young people in Poland, prepared by Una Veza Foundation. It shows very clearly, and it's based on the anonymous declarations of the youth, that over half of young people feel lack of motivation to act. Almost 1/4 does not have will to live. Almost one third has trouble learning. Every third young person feels lonely. How can we create bonds in this loneliness? 1 out of 3 has sleeping problems, and almost 1/3 does not accept who they are and how they look. 1 out of 3 students is regularly on diet. 16% mutilates their own body. 50% makes purchases in games. Almost half starves themselves or eats excessively. Many of them says also that in spite of bad mood, they keep exercising because it helps them stay slim and reduces stress. Almost half of them, over half of them, watches Fame MMA Gala. I don't know if you know it, but I did watch it. It does not have much to do with sports. Every third person watches contents presenting violence, and every fifth watches pornography. Every third person has might have depression. 4 out of 10 thought about suicide. Every 4th young person admits that they talked about suicide. Every 10th student declares that they took an suicidal attempt. 1 out of 5 students declare that they do not have the will to live, and every 5th person also claims that they had planned suicide. So it's a Maslow's pyramid. If you remember that at the bottom, the most important need is the need to not be hungry, to feel safe, and then we climb up the ladder to reach out for other needs, and we take actions to achieve them. Then we want to be accepted, then we want to be admired, and at the very top of the pyramid, when we have all this, we can grow, develop. So we can read, follow our interests. This is on the very top of this pyramid. And we can think of we can think what we like, but we will not cheat biology, psychology. And we need to remember that if the basic needs of the young person are not met, it will be very difficult for them to develop, or it might even be impossible. One needs to know a lot, but also you need to want to be the guide for the young person in this difficult world. You need to be aware of the context in which we function, economic, social, psychological. But we also need to have something to offer. We could, for example, say, as Terry Pratchett says, that Darwin's theory of evolution explains how lower life forms can evolve into higher ones, which in turn makes it entirely reasonable that a human should evolve into an orangutan, while remaining a librarian, since there is no higher life form than a librarian. And I would extend this group by every teacher, educator, publisher with a mission who not only are in this room, but also work for the benefit of my child and your children and other children. You really need to have very special skills and a will to fight to manage this task. How are we perceived by others? In the middle of 19th century, the librarian, later called bookworm, was perceived this way. Well, if in 19th century they had a bookshelf and a suit, it means Rockefeller. Very nice. The contemporary librarian moves between those two extremes. Which of the gentlemen in the room is a librarian? It's not a large group, but a strong one. Dear ladies. And let me address Antoni, a great librarian. When it turns out that you work in a library, what is the first question? How did you fail in life? Why aren't you working in the railways? Why don't you have your own business that you started in the 90s? Who is this male librarian to you? Because very often the stereotype is very unfair, that people who look for a job in libraries, they do not like other people. They want to hide from you behind the books. They just want to read those books, keep them for a longer period, at the cost of the reader, of course. What is the librarian like? And what about the female librarian? It's 1946. Let me tell you, it's only going to get better. Thick glasses. And then in the end, she will be eaten by cats after her death. Well, it's not such a bad perspective when you take into consideration the cost of a burial in Poland. There is a different librarian, which is maybe I'm not a discoverer, or maybe I don't like adventures, but I am proud of who I am. I am a librarian. I told you at the beginning that for me, the job that I do is the source of power, joy, and the feeling of my professional success. I come from a small village next to Krakow where there are only 35 houses, and as one of very few, we had a bookshelf in our house. But to be clear, I never saw my parents read. They were working in the field, they were poor people, and they never had time to sit down and read. I always saw my parents when they were working very hard or when they were sleeping. But my dad, a very special person, introduced a rule in the house, thanks to which I do not live next to Krakow anymore, and I'm here talking to you today. He said that if someone reads and learns, they do not have to do any physical work on the field. Some of the books in the house were deeply hidden because we were not allowed to touch it. So when everyone went outside to work, you know what I would do. I make jokes of it, but think about what I said at the beginning, what brought you here. Because just like with Anne of Green Gables, those who knew Joseph belonged to the common club. And I have the impression that we are also the people who talk to each other in one language. We talk to each other because at the beginning there was the word, and the word is important. And the book revolves around the word, and that's why it's important. I have all the diseases of the librarian. I like order, but I also have my favorite word. I don't know if you do. The word that you like to read, that you like to look at, think about it. Maybe this could be your homework. Is there one word which is important for you? My favorite word is abracadabra. Let it happen as I said. This is not a word that was invented for the fairy tale. It's the word that comes from old Armenian language. We forget about it, we make jokes of it, but we do not appreciate its value. Let things happen. As I said, I will create as I say. The word has a strong power. The word started the war, and it could also stop it. Remember about the words that you remember from your childhood. If you had, you will make it, you can do it, it's worth it. Usually, we rather remember when someone tells us, you're stupid, it makes no sense, you're not going to achieve anything. The word has meaning. Sometimes around the young person whose picture is presented in the report of Una Cerveza, sometimes there is no person who would say, I believe in you and I know that you can make anything. And then the role of this person can be taken by the book, because book is also word and it can have this function. So I would like to ask you how it happened that we, librarians, went from this scary moment when the book was locked deeply and unavailable. We were working on the language, we were working on the communication, new channels and methods to express the content, and today we are here in the world where we can reduce the communication to 3 letters, LOL, WTF, or to a, with ASAP, as my publisher colleague says, or to a smiley face. This is your task, to talk about the value of the word, to remember about it, to be aware what can be the importance of this word in the development of a human being, to teach them the importance of the words, of the values, and about the load that they carry. I keep my fingers crossed for you. I encourage you to participate in workshops in the National Library if you want to develop your skills. But I also have another report related with the words of Magda Kłos-Podsiadło. Let's cooperate with each other. Let's talk. Let's exchange information. Contemporary librarian has a very difficult task. You need to be persons who function perfectly in the new digital world. You need to be people who have knowledge, very often a narrow knowledge, depending on the department of the library where you work. You need to be well oriented on the book market. 200,000 books published per year. It's a huge area to read, to get to know. You also need to be censors, and you need to add some value to those things. You need to assess them, because parents who come to library, they are looking for intelligent, wise books. It's your task to evaluate them, but you also need to have emotional intelligence, social intelligence, apart from this traditional one, of course, because your work is based on a deep intellectual effort. You are also organizing events. You do it very well. Raise your hands. Who has never brought any paper and crayons from home to make it work? You are very creative, and you can do something out of nothing. You can write applications for financing. I cannot do that. So let me tell you also that at the end, I really admire your work. I support you, and sometimes it's hard for me to believe how come with all so many difficulties and such modest resources you are able to achieve such amazing effects. Congratulations to you. I keep my fingers crossed. If you need any support from the Polish section of IBBY, I encourage you to contact me. And remember that in every library, you are really always welcome. And please tell your small readers that this is the only shop in the world where you get what you want without having money. So this is a very fair situation, because a young person does not earn money. Thank you very much, and let's have a coffee break.
Kawa jest naprawdę...
The coffee is really very good, so thank you very much. Thank you for your patience and for listening.
Sure, okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, it turns out that due to time restrictions, we can't wait any longer. So, let's start. And I'm saying hello to you for the first time, because I haven't been on the stage before. I am Beata Jewiarz. I'm starting from the very end, actually, but anyway, hope this is okay for the organizers. So, ladies and gentlemen, this debate will be related to values, the community, how you can create communities, all in order to reinforce readership. And with us, starting from the right, we have Nowacka-Devillard, Widnokrąg Publishing House, Miranda, Zarzycka, Warsaw Culture Observatory, Monika, Wróbel-Lutz, Tatarak Publishing House, and Małgorzata, Swędrowska. I'm not sure whether you realize that with us we have two representatives of publishing houses, Tatarak and Widnokrąg. Małgorzata Swędrowska is a well-known person specializing in promoting readership, and Miranda Zarzycka might be a new figure. She's from the Warsaw Observatory of Culture. So now let me present you with the agenda for today. In a moment, Miranda will share with you on what the Warsaw Observatory of Culture actually does, and she will share with you the results of some research that they've conducted. And then we will have a debate a conversation. So, Miranda, over to you. In the research by Warsaw Observatory of Culture, several interesting conclusions came up, which are quite interesting from the viewpoint of building readership. But before you start, Miranda, what is your institution all about? Warsaw Observatory of Culture. Some of you might not know you. Who are you? Good afternoon. Thank you for the invitation. I have a bit of a stage fright. Sorry for that. But it's because I'm speaking here to people who have been doing that for many years, and I am just a researcher, not a librarian myself. So the Warsaw Observatory of Culture is an urban institution of culture in Warsaw with some specific research profile. We wish to do research and at the same time create room for artists representing different domains. Our actions are aimed at a very wide target group, including individual artists and researchers, but also institutions dealing with culture and public organizations active in the area of culture. Right. Thank you. So now let's hear from your presentation. It's part of some study that will be published in May, right? Yes, we do hope it will be published in May. And then we can tell you more about the culture users in Warsaw. Because of this conference, we will hear about a section of that big study which is devoted to readership. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to share with you some details about a study that is still ongoing. It was initiated in connection to another piece of research. There is a cultural education research that we've been conducting. Well, it has turned out that this topic is equally interesting and broad. Right now, by the way, the study started in November last year, and so far we did some focused group interviews with different groups in the area of education, librarians, students, pupils, teachers, and also individual interviews with experts that specialize in different readership education areas. So right from the very beginning, readership education is very broadly defined. This broad definition allowed us actually to reach out to different groups and hear some valuable information on reading. So our definition involved 4 pillars. The first one is critical reading, in-depth reading that stimulates critical thinking, where one analyzes, is inspired, and can extrapolate and question the information in the text. This is something that should definitely be supported. Pillar 2 is reading against disinformation. This is again about critical analysis of sources of information. Reading per se as a form of entertainment, and reading as a community project. Even though reading books is quite an intimate activity, still we are surrounded by many people with whom we relate to. So many social relations come into being by being inspired by the book. So what I'd like to stress today is what is reading in the digital era. So let me take a step back. What is reading all about these days? It's actually quite far from obvious. And our study has shown that you can have two approaches. Either reading is a technical activity whereby you decipher certain letters, signs, words, assigning meaning to them, and this is intersubjective. At the same time, there is this other part where reading could be seen as a wonderful experience of getting immersed in different worlds created in a book. So, a question arises. What presented worlds are available to us, and what presented worlds are available to different groups and generations of people that read books? We were interested also in the so-called reading communities. That means that reading books can be a pretext to then have conversations with people. So it's great to realize that, let's say, if you have about 30 people in a classroom, theoretically, you can make all of them concentrate on just one text and exchange their opinions. But is it really possible for them to have a free conversation about what they've read? It's difficult. It's only possible in a classroom context, maybe at a university. And so, what is the meaning of atmosphere with respect to reading and conversation to a fellow human being? How does it relate to a book and what a book can give you? And what more can you extract from a book after you've talked about this with someone else? Also, we've looked at different practices that could promote critical reading in children and teenagers. And there are a host of such practices, and I'm hoping that we will have the opportunity to talk about them together, right? Yes, thank you very much. Have you finished? Yes, I have finished. Thank you very much. Well done. This was very brief in a nutshell, comprehensive at the same time. We can learn more in May, Warsaw Observatory of Culture. So, two themes have surfaced here, that is reading communities. And you mentioned also reading per se. I think this is the most interesting context, looking at where we are right now, that is the National Library, whereby a book is seen as a story with a beginning, with an ending. It's individual, but it at the same time could be indeed a community experience. But before we move on to discuss communities, then, dear ladies, tell us more about values. In a life, during one's lifetime, we need to take certain decisions. Your life decisions was to become publishers, researchers, meaning you decided to become kind of a guide that sets a direction and shares the values that you believe to be important. So, my question to you is as follows. What values are these, and what do you believe to be so decisive? How come you still want to impact young people? You are like discoverers of new territories, taking young people with you in that journey with some very special poetic language. I'm also thinking about the very first readership experiences that young children can make with their first books, because you do have such books. But also Widnokrąg offers books for teenagers. So first, let's start with the values. Ania. So what is important for you in the publishing process when you decide what book you will pick and why? And ultimately, what is the decisive factor why books go to libraries or to children? So we heard before a lot about values, and it's so great that this topic is coming back, because it's not only the values which are upheld by publishers. Of course, people that publish books, they always bring into it part of themselves, part of their own internal child. We all have one. I believe that you can always awaken your internal child. What you recall from your childhood and what you experienced. You always know who was next to you, what music you were listening to, or on whose lap you were seated. So all this is also part of that experience. So these are those individual personal values of every publisher. But on the other hand, there is also something that all of us have in common, which is a book not only conveys the content by words, well, especially picture books, but what I would like to say is that the content is not only in the words, but also in the image and in the whole book architecture, that is the structure of the book, the cover, how it's designed, what colors have been used. Is it glued? Is it sewn? So these might strike you as little details, but this is a cultural good, and it's an object which is so crucial. When a child lays his or her fingers for the first time on a book and their motor skills are not well developed yet, then it's a great experience that they can touch the book, they can change the pages. So this experience of a book using all the senses, because of course some children will bite books, we know that, or they will lick them, or they will sniff them to check the smell, and I personally sniff them, to be honest. So yes, a book includes all of these elements. So when you talk about values, I like to say, as Stefan Emerson once said, long time ago, and in contrast to this myth of bestseller, whereby a book must sell, of course we want books to sell, but what he said is that it should be not the bestseller, but the best looker, a book that looks best and that will draw attention of children. So this is how I perceive the book as the whole architecture. So a very sensual vision, yes, indeed, very sensual. And I'm smiling at Małgosia now. Right, Małgosia will share her thoughts in a moment. But Ania, one more question. In the last 20 years, this industry, we've been talking on, and you always talk about the beginning when the situation was so bad on the market in the 90s, and different publishing houses, and you, the publishers, you would introduce those quality books onto the market, both in terms of pictures and text. Now, after 20 years, I'm wondering, what are you now delighted with? Because we are a little bit oversaturated. So many beautiful books have been produced in the meantime. So I don't want to answer this question, but what's next? Tell me, please. I mean, you know hundreds or thousands of beautiful books. So it's like the emergence of a new child in a family. You can become delighted over and over again. It's a never-ending story. Oh yes, indeed, it's a never-ending story. One keeps being delighted over and over again. Sometimes we will turn to new topics that we have never discussed before, with beautiful pictures, and that allows us to go to the next level. For example, books on difficult experiences, on topics that used to be taboo. for different reasons. So one can get delighted with such books that explore very new topics. And sometimes it turns out that with images, with pictures, even though we always have this worry that maybe someone will think the content is simply too difficult. And then we come to the conclusion, yes, we were able to capture that difficult topic. And we did it in such a way that we didn't overburden our reader, the child. And we must remember about this. So this is where I see this new area for enlightenment. Oh, and now I would even provocatively say, we heard a moment ago about this report, so I would provocatively say that we see an increase in the readership among children and young people, 15 to 18 years of age. And to me, this is extremely interesting. And I think someone even conducted research saying that it's because of the last decade where so many good children's books were published. So we were able to educate good readers, those people that want the book to be present in their life. Maybe those young children, after they become parents, maybe they will keep nurturing that readership. So this is what I find so delighting, that there is still some hope and that it all made sense. Okay, so now Małgorzata Swędrowska, what's your take on it?
So my interest in books is about being amazed by people, and one of my students in the 3rd grade told me that he did not want to read the book Children from Bullerbyn, and they even wrote a petition to the teachers because that was a tradition. Sometimes the petition was accepted, sometimes we were discussing because they said it was boring for them because of the landscape and everything. But then I told them, you could choose another book because this one is really great. But this was my perception as an adult. But I also have interest in another person, and I looked at it from the perspective of the students, and I asked them what would have to happen so that they would be interested in the book. And there was a common conclusion of all of us that there just needs to be something more interesting in the book, something more than just reading. And I was actually surprised by that because I have been reading since I was a child. Because I've been visiting libraries since I was a child, and that's where I got to learned about the value of a book. So I didn't understand them, but I was trying to look at it from their perspective. A child does not have a lot of feeling of agency when they're at school, when they're just a listener or just a beginner reader, because it's us teachers who set the rules. We come forward with a text, with an obligatory book, and we tell them, so now you are going to read it, then I'm going to ask you about the content. We do not let the children choose what they can do with the text, what they can tell about it. We just set certain tasks for them. But I did it, I tried to do it the other way around. I started to read with the children so that it's them who are not only recipients of the text as readers of the book that I brought to them, but I was trying to show them that in this process of reading the book, that they are also important, that small doesn't mean worse, that when you look at the book, you see there something that maybe I do not see, like Paolo said today about a picture book. I experienced it many times, that it was a child who showed me some element in the book that I could not see because I was so focused on the content. So For me, books are not only books are about a meeting. So reading is a meeting, whether we do it individually or in a group. In a group, it's very difficult, especially in kindergarten or in school. It's difficult to not lose this potential. For example, a child is used to this calm reading at home, but then they go to school where you need to react at the same time. You need to remain quiet. I am generalizing a bit, but you know what I'm talking about. And we do not want to destroy this beautiful act of reading. We want to allow the child to live the book, because we know that at school there are various technical issues, frameworks, many different people who have different attention span. But there is a way to do it. I encourage you to participate in my workshops in the afternoon. I will show you how to do it, and those who are here who experienced it, they know that it works. Małgosia, sorry, I know that you can talk for a very long time. It's very interesting, but unfortunately this is my role. 2 words of summary about the values, because this is what I'm asking you about now. I know that each of you can talk a lot about the importance of reading, so please 2 words about values. The book goes beyond its format, and it's kind of a meeting with another person. Amen. Monika. Wróbel-Lutz from Tatarak Publishing House. Okay, now I'm a bit scared. There will be no more quotes. I'm afraid to start. Well, I didn't plan to become a publisher. I thought I would be someone else. I don't know if, Anya, you always wanted to be a publisher. It's never been on my agenda. Within my imagination, I didn't even know what a publisher actually does and what it is about. For many years, it seems to me that it's a similar function, the editor and publisher. So I haven't really planned this career. It was rather some kind of a need and coincidence, because I graduated in art school. And as I founded a family, I had children, I started buying books for my children. And my eyes hurt, actually. It was really difficult to find good books outside of the library on the market. So for me, there was this need to do something for myself. And that was obviously very naive, but I think that there is a similar need behind many choices in this area. So my deeper thoughts about why I'm doing it, what's behind it, they came much later when I managed to survive in those choices where there was always this primary awe behind it, the story that touches me as a human being, even if it's just a book for the youngest readers. It's always the story that is the most important. This admiration that should be behind it, because if it's not there, it's difficult to sell the book which you don't believe in. I don't know how to do it. I have the books that, for example, my husband really loved, and he said, "Oh, hey, this is going to be great." He was touched by it. I was not, so I don't know how to sell it to someone. I don't know how to talk about it. So I think this is another important thing that you do on a daily basis, because you sell those books to the readers, and I know which employees of bookstores like certain books, because if they like a book, they know how to sell it. We had a book that no one wanted to buy. It was a beautiful book about death. So we had this book in our portfolio long ago. We still have it, and we keep selling it. But I know that there are two bookstores where the bookseller could sell this book to absolutely anyone, and probably there was certain admiration behind it and his personal involvement. And you do it on a daily basis, and I'm very grateful for this. My meeting with the book was first in the library because my parents were reading to children. I was the youngest, so they were not so motivated anymore. You know, they would say, well, maybe you can read on your own. And I had this librarian lady who was always preparing me a pile of books for the weekend, and these were always books about Wild West. And that really shaped me, I have to say. It was, I think, the admiration of that lady, and I loved her, and I think I read everything that could be read about cowboys, Indians in my primary school. Do you have something about cowboys in your portfolio? Well, I'm still grateful to this lady. The library does not exist there anymore, but all my weekends looked exactly like that. I was reading about cowboys. You do not have a book about cowboys in your portfolio, in your publisher's portfolio? No, I do not have it yet. Everything is still possible, probably. Yes, there can be new admiration. But I guess that you are those special persons who transfer this admiration. And if we were to look at the actors of the stage related with the readers, you are one of the most important, because your admiration can be reflected in the eyes of a child or another person. So it's very important that you do not lose this admiration, or that you're not afraid to share it, because I imagine that you can be in admiration, but not everyone has the personality to share it, or a temperament. But it turns out that it works, and it works in every field, whether it's at school, a library, within the family, or at the publishing house. So now, publishing and readers communities. I would like you to share your experiences as publishers and researchers, and we will hear about the research related with readers, communities, and how does your experience look in terms of extending those communities. And it's not only about libraries, but all other institutions that can actually participate in the process of reading. Miranda.
Yes.
I will answer maybe next to your question, but I think it can give us some guidance. When we were discussing a group interview with Ola, who supports me, it turned out that persons who work in libraries are the most responsive and the most willing group out of all with which we had a chance to talk. Okay, so big applause to you. And I talk about it not only to make you all feel good, but to draw attention to the fact that these persons are very conscious about their place, their role, and their task within the field of readers' education. And what inspires me deeply is that when we think about libraries, not as book collections, but a place where people meet, where there are people with whom we can talk about reading, about the books that inspire us, and we open ourselves to talking with people who come to the library to talk about their experiences. It turns out that those communities and cooperations are really amazing, and they function. Like, for example, in the library in the Wola district in Warsaw, there are fans of the fantasy genre, and they meet to discuss it, to talk about it. Or as in the library, in case of the library in Bielany district, there is the possibility of the people to rent video games, which are very textual, which have a lot of narrative. There is the option, the opportunity to discuss, exchange experiences, but also the fact itself that they can come and participate in it through, for example, recording their own rap songs. And this is also related with the fact that you look at the reading process in a broader way, so not only experiencing the book itself, so also using a video game is qualified as an element of the reading process. Yes, among our experts, we had persons who are aware that readers' education needs to be perceived not only within the context of cultural education, but also media education, preparation to live in a world which has other media than books, but which are also cultural texts, which contain a narrative. For example, Professor Paweł Felix mentions a great example how games can contain a very interesting story in which people can actually enter and they can become immersed in this world. There are also games where the cooperation and community is actually necessary in order to go through this fictional story. Yes, the RPG format is, for example, very good for that. Yes, but there are also picture books which do not have much text, but they present multiple stories, and even persons who do not have the ability, the technical ability of reading, can reach out for these books. And as it turns out, these are the years of life where we need the most, this conversation the most, and we need to have bonds with other people who are inviting us to these fictional worlds. And that is related with you, Małgosia. When it comes to sensory reading, I think it's a great model for children, right? In terms of storytelling. Yes, we need to talk a lot with adults about picture books, because I will refer once again to what Paolo said. It's I think that children know what's good. They have this natural ability to look for the good, for the beauty, and those picture books are also very interesting for them. For us adults, maybe not necessarily, because what can we actually read about if we do not see the content? The world is a very complex place, a multidimensional place, and a person is also made to live in a community. And therefore, without thinking too much how to do it, if we just understand that reading should be something natural, it should be a meeting, it should be a joyful reinforcement, then it will flow naturally from us. Unless we tell ourselves that it's going to be difficult because we will be working with 5-year-olds and they are difficult. Yes, they might be difficult, but as we know that children are very lively, maybe I'm going to introduce some movement, some songs to the reading to fulfill their needs. And it might turn out that this meeting, which was supposed to be difficult, is actually very interesting. Let me mention one city, Chocicza, next to Nowe Miasto, next to Jarocin, which is close to Poznań, and Poznań is close to Warsaw, so it's not so far. And this is a library where people from the small town come very eagerly to the library. But what happened at the beginning? The librarians visited the village, and they were collecting certain objects, items from the village, and they created kind of an exhibition of objects of remembrance from that village. So people come out of curiosity to see if the object that they donated to the library is actually there, and to check what the neighbor showed, for example. Yes. And moreover, the library is open to conversations with the readers, so the librarians not only talk about books, but they create a place for meetings. So the ladies come and they can organize some workshops of craftsmanship, and at the same time they can read some books. Even if they don't read books, they are already in a library, and they can find out about some workshops for children, and they can participate in those workshops with their grandchildren. And that's why the library lives, because there are those amazing librarians who listen to their readers. The library is not only a place where you borrow books, it's also a place where people meet. And you can see at the example of this Chocicza town how you can organize it. It can inspire others, how easy it can be to talk, to listen to another person, because each person is potential. Sometimes we might wonder how to do it. We have a very small budget. But if I ask the readers, if I tell them that I would like to organize a festival, to organize something nice for children, maybe you will give me some advice, all this. And then it turns out that everyone can contribute, and we can achieve it together. So I encourage you to share those duties and to involve others. And when reading with children, when I organize events, workshops with books, I'm not the only one to be responsible for it to be beautiful, valuable. Think about it that way. You are meeting valuable people, also those small ones, and they also have something to say, and the meeting will be valuable, even if the child says this book was stupid, and then you will ask them, why was it stupid for you? Because you were reading about mom and dad, and my dad doesn't live with us anymore, and you wrote that the dad is fulfilling all the dreams. And suddenly it turns out that the book is just a key to a conversation, to a meeting with a child, that what the child said is not only how it sounds on the surface, but in the conversation you found out what was the essence, what the child was actually trying to say. So I could continue for hours, but reading is something more than just reading. Thank you.
Well said, thank you. It's great that it's Małgorzata that will be running the workshops today, right? So Monika, let me remind the question to you. We'd like to focus on the people who are gathered here in this room. We have some institutional experiences also present, so could you share with us more about schools, about libraries, any things that maybe are not that obvious? Why are you laughing, by the way? Too many questions, right? So we're talking about communities, right? Yes. Communities in a broad sense. Right, this Mały Koneser festival, this is an example also of such a community, publishing community with some 28 or 29 publishing houses that cooperate. And again, big thank you goes to Magda and Robert, who are not present because they are the initiators of that event. So again, community definitely is organized around reading. And our cooperation here is present in many areas. For example, we organized the workshops today, and this marks the continuation of measures that we already conducted at another library at Koszykowa Street in Warsaw, so-called table workshops. And this is quite critical experience because we can truly encounter you and learn from you. What is it that you need? We can check what ideas you have regarding the work with books. And sometimes you're saying, no, this is a bad idea. It won't work. You should do it differently. And we take this feedback. And I think it's also a way of getting to know each other better. We really appreciate such feedback. We want to know what is it that you actually need. What actions would you expect us to carry out? So this brings some great effects. Sometimes this leads to some friendships even, or some very good relations. Right, Monika, and do you cooperate with school libraries? Only occasionally. I see, and we would like to focus on it next year, actually. Right, so let's conduct a little test. Whom of you represents a school library? Hands up. Quite many of you. And other libraries? Okay. So, indeed, non-school libraries are dominant today. But I'm asking about the school libraries because I think this is quite important. And we could have actually a separate conference only on school libraries. That would be great. We don't have much time left, I know. So talking about school libraries, I am a publisher, but at the same time, I also co-created a Polish-French school in Warsaw. And we organized a library. And the head librarian actually is also here, but this is a person that doesn't like to be in the limelight, so we will just say hi. And sometimes when I walk through the school, when I go somewhere, I see that the school library is a place where children can have some rest from being in the classroom, seated at a desk. And so, referring to what you've said before, you don't need a lot. You need some little cushions or sitting bags, and you can create a place where children, for example, lie on the floor on a cushion and they read books. And even though they read individually, everyone reads something else, it's their free time. They would come during the pause, for example, to the library, and they would be peeking into the book of someone else. They would be showing things to each other and exchange. So this reading community, this doesn't need to be like sitting at a desk at a classroom. No, it can be something else. It can be just leafing through a book together with someone and thinking, no, that's not for me, I will pick something else. So libraries, be it at schools or somewhere in the city, play a very central role because this is a place where people have access to books for free. As we said before, a child doesn't earn money. They can come to this kind of a store and just lend it. Also, let's remember about small towns. In big cities, you have many options, and there are different libraries, there are branch offices and other institutions. So if you look around, you will find many such workshops or offering for children. 8,000 is the number of libraries in the countryside, 6,000 in cities, and almost 60% of libraries operate outside of cities. So there's a lot of potential here. The Widnokrąg carried out this kind of a reverse competition, meaning we would send books, not randomly. Those libraries that applied could get a book or 2 books, including a scenario. And we invited these libraries to take part, and this kind of a benefit for them was that they will get the book for free as long as they do some event based on it. For example, using our scenarios. And we've been doing that for a long time. And we've observed that those libraries from small towns where seemingly there is a shortage of resources, they would be very creative. They would carry out some great events. Local culture centers would be involved, and then they would publish photos on their websites. And seriously, these were some drama lessons, storytelling activities. And this all just because we sent to them 1 book for free. And in the end, winning libraries could get a whole package of books. But it really was so hard to pick the winner because all the contenders were just so great. It really was a hard time to pick the winner. So what I'd like to say to you is that the potential of school libraries is immense. Because think about the children from houses where parents are not present or they don't have this reading tradition at home. Let's remember that we criticize parents, but sometimes we never ask the question why they don't read. Maybe they were not read to themselves. So this is where the role of the library comes in. And I'm so sorry that bookstores are diminishing these days. We don't have more time to elaborate on this, sadly, but it's about the library. I mean, if a child is bored, they have no lessons because it's the winter break, well, they can always go to a library. And there will be some theater lessons, maybe some spectacles, some games. So really, let's create this room for children. Let's create some space so that they can feel there well, so that they no longer have to fit into this school schema. At home, people just sit at the table to eat, maybe only, but we can sometimes do things differently. I'm so sorry, but I need to stop you here. This is very well related to my own motivation, being a journalist. I have this view that all of you gathered here representing different groups, you are in your small communities discoverers on the one hand, but you can also be this person that makes it possible to transfer the world of culture as such. So an encounter with a book should be much more. Think about towns or villages. Librarians can indeed surprise people. Like if you went to the cinema or to the theater, you can share that with your readers. And I think we need to think about the culture in more broader perspective. Books are great, but they are part of culture and a humanistic worldview. Publishers, librarians take all part in this process. Publishers are a role model, and by what you do, you show to us that culture plays an important role. So in the end, I know it's time for some punchline. So, briefly, tell me, what could we do more in this relationship between librarians and publishers? So what tips would you advise to us for the future? Because we heard in many areas that it's also about creation. The more creative, the more authentic you are. So Małgosia, could you start? Well, first of all, we need to engage in a conversation. We need a platform, for example, a digital platform, for quick exchange of ideas, where we can share books. Sometimes, I mean, there are so many books which are published, and then they all just get lost from the mainstream. In the past, it would be 6 months. That was the period where a book was alive. Now it's a couple of days only. After a couple of days, it will be substituted by another book. So we would need such a place. A library is a place where a book gets a long life. It would be great to have a similar place somewhere on the net to present these gems for people who have a hard time to keep abreast. Right, so a longer life for books, right? Yes. Monika, what about you? I agree. I guess we indeed need a place where it's easier to find books. So that we can have a look at the best publications. Oh, but think about IBBY, IBBY, Lokomotywa, and other platforms. Yes, but I'm talking about a place where you can physically see a book. Right now, there are very few of them. It's the fair, book fairs, and bookstores. 50% of bookstores actually disappeared in recent years, over the last 10 years. This is half of the previous number. And it's not only about small bookstores, but also chain bookstores. So the opportunity to see a book alive physically only is a library or fair, book fair. And this is off the mic. Right, Magda nodded. We all realize that. So we will continue this conversation with you right after this discussion, okay? So Miranda, briefly. What more could you do to improve these community relations? That is schools, librarians, and publishers. I think all these groups and institutions need to realize that they share the same goal. I like to view this from the perspective of digital revolution. That is the slogan of our study. So my experience is quite scarce. I provided private lessons in philosophy at some point, and I remember reading together Émile by Jean-Jacques Rousseau. In book 5, Sophie is presented as a perfect wife for Émile, and she is only socialist in such a way that she should become a perfect mom and a wife. And whenever she wants to develop any gifts, she should remember that once she is requested to do something else, she should stop doing that what she likes and help. So this shows very well that there are too many stimuli that we are exposed to. And a book that requires being immersed in reading, in the world which is presented in there, is the opportunity to slow down for a moment and to take some rest. And this is what we should remember, being the representatives of these sectors. Well, I'm sure it's a huge challenge for young people. It's a challenge to stay focused, right? Right, so on a final note, let me say the following. I'd like to actually appeal to all of us present here. Let's not be afraid of the image. We like to say children don't read, they only watch things. Let's use this as an opportunity. So let's appeal to children by comic books, by picture books, even drawn on the walls in a library. That could appeal to them, and maybe then they will move on to consume text, or they won't, because they may have some limitations, and yet they can consume content. And content, this is also image, it's not only text. So there are many carriers of content, and I think that we should use this fact. Nowacka-Devillard, Małgorzata Swędrowska, Monika, Wróbel, Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and let's have some lunch. Thank you.